What if I told you a wrestling legend took down a powerful media empire with one lawsuit? This isn't just about leaked video, scandal, or fame. This is the true story of how Hulk Hogan changed media law forever and walked away with $140 million. Known for his charisma and power in the WWE ring, Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, landed the fight of his life not in a steel cage, but in a Florida courtroom. It all began in 2012, when gossip site Gawker Media published a video of Hogan in an intimate moment with his best friend's wife. The clip was edited, sensationalized, and most importantly, unauthorized. Hogan had no idea he was being recorded. The emotional toll was immediate. Kids Googling Hulk Hogan and WrestleMania were now stumbling across a leaked tape. For Hogan, this wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a personal crisis. He sued Gawker, claiming the website violated his privacy in the most humiliating way. And in 2016, the world watched as the trial played out live online. Part soap opera, part media reckoning. Hogan's legal team made it clear, this wasn't about fame. This was about dignity. The jury agreed. They hit Gawker with a stunning $140 million judgment, enough to bankrupt the entire company. A later settlement reduced the figure to $31 million, but the damage was done. And the shockwaves? They're still being felt. Legal experts say this case shifted the balance of power between celebrities and the press. It proved that even if something is true, publishing it isn't always protected under the First Amendment, especially when it violates deep, personal boundaries. University of Iowa law professor Samantha Barbas put it bluntly, the public doesn't necessarily like the press, especially when it gets too personal. And Hogan had help. Behind the scenes, billionaire Peter Thiel, who had his own grudge against Gawker for outing him in 2007, secretly funded Hogan's lawsuit. Thiel later said it wasn't revenge. It was deterrence. What followed was a new era of aggressive legal action against the media. Even Donald Trump began suing major outlets, and many point to Hogan's victory as the turning point. In court, Hogan wept. He told the jury how deeply the betrayal cut. His fans had always seen him as invincible, but this fight wasn't about Hulk Hogan the wrestler. It was about Terry Bollea the man, and in the end, he won. So what do you think? Should celebrities have the power to silence the press when things get too personal? Or did Hulk Hogan draw the line exactly where it needed to be? Let us know in the comments below. Smash that like button if you believe privacy still matters, even for public figures. Subscribe for more deep dive stories that expose the untold side of fame, power, and justice. What happens when a wrestling icon takes on the media and wins? In one of the most shocking legal battles of the 2010s, Hulk Hogan, yes, the Hulk Hogan, stepped out of the wrestling ring and into a Florida courtroom. And what followed changed the game forever. It all started in 2012, when gossip site Gawker Media published a secretly recorded leaked tape of Hogan with the wife of his best friend. The clip was short, but the damage? Massive. And for Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a personal violation. He didn't know he was being filmed. He never gave consent. And when that video went public, Hogan said he felt completely humiliated. 8-year-old kids were Googling their wrestling hero and getting a leaked tape. So he fought back hard. In 2016, the world watched as Hogan took Gawker to court in a blockbuster civil trial. On one side, the First Amendment and freedom of the press. On the other, a celebrity's right to privacy, even when the content is true. And when the verdict came in, Hogan won. The jury awarded him a jaw-dropping $140 million in damages. Gawker didn't survive. They later settled for $31 million just to end the fight, but the message was clear. Privacy matters. Even for celebrities. Lawyers and legal experts say this case reshaped how the media covers public figures. It told the world that not everything that's true is fair game for the headlines. It drew a hard line between public interest and personal dignity. And behind the scenes, there was a twist. Hogan's legal team had a secret weapon, billionaire tech mogul Peter Thiel, who had his own score to settle with Gawker after they outed him in 2007. Thiel quietly funded Hogan's lawsuit, saying it wasn't about revenge, It was about making sure no one else went through what he did. In the courtroom, Hogan showed a different side. He broke down in tears when the jury sided with him. This wasn't about Hulkamania, this was about Terry Bollea, and the case didn't just impact journalism, it opened the floodgates. Since then, celebrities and politicians alike have gotten more aggressive with lawsuits against the media. Even former President Donald Trump has launched legal battles against major networks, some say, inspired by what Hogan pulled off. Legal scholars agree, this case was a turning point. Yes, news outlets still have powerful protections. But now? Courts, juries, and the public understand something crucial, even famous people have lines that shouldn't be crossed. And when they are? There can be consequences. Hulk Hogan may have built his legacy in the wrestling ring, but in that courtroom, he made history. Known worldwide for his fearless bravado inside the wrestling ring, Hulk Hogan scored one of his most significant victories not under the bright lights of WWE, but in a Florida courtroom. The legendary pro wrestler, born Terry Bollea, successfully sued gossip website Gawker Media after it published a secretly recorded leaked tape featuring Hogan and the wife of his then best friend. The emotional fallout from the leak led to a landmark ruling that reverberated across media law and celebrity privacy rights. In 2016, the high-stakes civil trial unfolded as a cultural showdown between First Amendment protections and a celebrity's right to privacy. The jury ultimately sided with Hogan, awarding him a staggering $140 million in damages. Although the case later settled for $31 million to avoid drawn-out appeals, the financial blow was fatal. Gawker Media went out of business. More importantly, the case set a powerful precedent. Even truthful reporting could cross the line if it invaded the intimate and personal boundaries of public figures. Hogan's win didn't just silence a media outlet, it sent shockwaves through the journalism industry. Hogan's case reminded everyone that the public doesn't always sympathize with the press, said Samantha Barbas, a University of Iowa law professor specializing in press freedom and First Amendment law. It highlighted how deeply the public values personal privacy, even for celebrities. And that message hasn't faded. The verdict has since emboldened other public figures, including politicians, to challenge unflattering media coverage more aggressively. Former President Donald Trump, for instance, has mounted legal action against major outlets like the Wall Street Journal, ABC, and CBS, in a trend some scholars trace directly back to Hogan's legal victory. This case marked the beginning of privacy and libel lawsuits being weaponized to take down media organizations, Barbas added. For Hogan, the battle was about more than money or fame, it was personal. His lawsuit centered on a 2012 post by Gawker that published an edited version of a video showing Hogan having an affair with Heather Clem, wife of Florida radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge Clem. Although Bubba had reportedly consented to the tryst, and even filmed it, Hogan testified he had no idea the encounter was being recorded. In court, Hogan broke down in tears as the jury returned its verdict. His attorney, Ken Turkle, recalled how deeply affected Hogan was by the leak and the damage it caused to his public image and personal life. To him, the privacy element was everything, Turkle said. Kids were Googling Hulk Hogan and WrestleMania, and they were being served a leaked tape. That cut deep. The 3-week trial, held in St. Petersburg, Florida, drew national attention. Thousands of wrestling fans, media observers, and legal analysts tuned into live streams of the proceedings. The courtroom drama revealed intimate details about Hogan's personal life, including moments where jurors viewed images of him in thong underwear. The trial also cast a spotlight on Gawker's unconventional editorial practices and its definition of journalism. A significant part of Hogan's argument revolved around the distinction between his public persona, Hulk Hogan, and his private identity, Terry Bollea. He emphasized that the hypermasculine, over-the-top character fans saw in the ring was not the same person as the man behind the curtain. After the trial, another bombshell emerged. Hogan's legal fight had been financially backed by tech billionaire Peter Thiel. Gawker had outed Thiel as gay in 2007, and Thiel later admitted he helped fund the lawsuit, not as a vendetta, but as a deterrent to what he saw as reckless, damaging journalism. Despite Gawker's arguments that the leaked tape was newsworthy and protected by the First Amendment, the jury wasn't convinced. They ruled that the video crossed the line from public interest into a gross invasion of privacy. Amy Guida, a professor at Brooklyn Law School, noted the case has since reshaped the legal landscape. More people, including judges, now understand that you can sue over the release of truthful information, Guida said, if it involves something deeply personal and if its exposure would be considered highly offensive. That said, news organizations still enjoy wide legal latitude when publishing material about public figures, especially when the subject matter is deemed newsworthy. But Hogan's case proved that even the most powerful legal shields can be pierced under the right conditions. As long as there's demonstrable news value and the media can articulate it well, they can often get these cases dismissed early, Guida explained. But Hogan showed that when a story drifts too far into personal humiliation, all bets are off. In the end, Hulk Hogan didn't just take down Gawker, he changed the rules of the game. His courtroom victory became a warning to media outlets everywhere: fame doesn't cancel out the right to privacy, and not every truth is theirs to tell. And in the aftermath of Hogan's victory, the media industry was forced to take a long, uncomfortable look in the mirror. For years, outlets like Gawker thrived on the blurred line between entertainment and intrusion. Their bread and butter was scandal, raw and unfiltered. But Hogan's case drew a line in the sand. What was once brushed off as celebrity gossip was now being scrutinized under a legal microscope. Journalists began asking themselves, where does public interest end, and voyeurism begin? The chilling effect was real. Editors, publishers, and even tabloid TV producers started reconsidering the kinds of stories they would greenlight. Celebrities, meanwhile, saw a path to reclaiming control over their own narratives. Privacy, once considered a lost cause in the digital age, was suddenly back on the table. And for Hogan? The win came at a cost. Though vindicated in court, the public scrutiny was intense. Details about his private life were dissected on air, mocked online, and turned into memes. His legal victory didn't erase the trauma, it only proved that even legends can bleed outside the ring. But for legal scholars and privacy advocates, Hogan's case became a cornerstone. A wake-up call that the legal system could adapt to the age of viral exposure. It also fueled a broader conversation: should billionaires like Peter Thiel be allowed to secretly fund lawsuits that could destroy entire media companies? Was Hogan a hero defending personal dignity, or the first move in a quiet war against press freedom? The debate still rages. What's undeniable is the legacy. Hogan's case redefined the boundaries of privacy law in the 21st century. It empowered others to fight back. And it served as a stark reminder that in the battle between clicks and conscience, sometimes, the conscience wins. So the next time you hear someone say Hulk Hogan only made history in the ring, tell them about the courtroom, tell them about the $140 million verdict, tell them how Terry Bollea pinned an empire to the mat, and changed media law forever. The Hulk Hogan vs. Gawker case didn't just raise questions, it raised alarms. Media watchdogs began issuing warnings about a dangerous new precedent: that wealthy individuals could weaponize the court system to silence critical reporting. Some called it a chilling blow to investigative journalism. Others called it long overdue accountability. Peter Thiel's involvement, once secret, became the center of that firestorm when it was revealed that Thiel had funded Hogan's legal team in secret. Critics called it a shadow war against free speech. Defenders argued it was poetic justice. After all, Gawker had outed Thiel without his consent, a personal violation in its own right. Thiel didn't flinch. He told the New York Times, quote, "I saw Gawker as an outlet that took a gleeful pleasure in destroying people's lives. I didn't think they should exist." But here's the deeper question: was this about justice, or revenge? What Hogan's legal triumph exposed was more than a media scandal, it revealed a cultural fracture. One side demanded transparency and freedom of information. The other demanded accountability, compassion, and limits. And at the heart of it stood Hulk Hogan, a man once cheered for ripping t-shirts in the ring, now weeping on the witness stand, pleading not for glory, but for privacy. This trial wasn't just about a tape. It was about the kind of society we want to be. A society where the media can investigate the powerful, yes, but also a society where human dignity isn't sacrificed for page views, where the line between journalism and exploitation isn't erased by the click of a mouse. And the truth? That line is still being drawn. Since Hogan's case, more celebrities have followed suit, literally. We've seen lawsuits from actors, athletes, politicians, influencers. Some legit. Some arguably frivolous. But all of them carry the DNA of Hogan v. Gawker. Even the legal community has shifted. Law schools now teach the case as a milestone in tort privacy law. Professors ask students, is the truth always worth telling? And at what cost? In many ways, Hogan's fight was bigger than him. It wasn't just a legal battle. It was a societal reckoning, and it left behind one final lesson: power comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a steel chair in the hands of a champion, sometimes it's a billionaire's checkbook behind a closed door, and sometimes it's the courage to say, "This went too far." Hogan said it. A jury agreed. And an empire collapsed. As the dust settled on Hogan versus Gawker, the legal world didn't just take notice, it began shifting. Lawyers across the country saw the case as a blueprint for how to approach privacy lawsuits in the digital age. For decades, the First Amendment had provided near-absolute protection to the press when reporting on public figures, even when those reports ventured into private matters. But Hogan's case signaled that the courts were becoming more sympathetic to arguments rooted in personal dignity, mental anguish, and reputational harm. The term newsworthiness, long used as a shield by media outlets, suddenly became a contested battlefield. Traditionally, if a subject was famous, or their actions could be argued to be in the public interest, the media could publish almost anything about them. But Hogan's legal team flipped that assumption. They argued that being a public figure doesn't mean surrendering your right to a private life, especially when the content in question has no real journalistic value and is designed purely to embarrass. Judges took notice. Scholars debated. And suddenly, there was a path forward for those who once felt powerless against the machinery of modern media. The precedent didn't just inspire future litigants, it made media companies more cautious. Editors began consulting with legal teams more frequently before publishing potentially invasive content. Risk assessments became part of the editorial process. And in boardrooms across New York, Los Angeles, and London, digital publishers were being asked a once rhetorical question: just because we can publish this, should we? Meanwhile, for Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire turned silent benefactor, the fallout was more strategic than personal. While critics painted him as a villain manipulating the court system from behind the scenes, others viewed his move as a check on a media industry that had operated with impunity for too long. Thiel's willingness to bankroll Hogan's case opened up a new model: third-party litigation funding, where wealthy individuals or companies could discreetly support lawsuits that aligned with their values or vendettas. This practice has grown since Hogan's victory, with some warning that it risks turning the courts into battlegrounds for the powerful, while others argue it's simply a way for those without deep pockets to seek justice. Regardless of where one stands, Thiel's role in the saga raised an uncomfortable truth: in modern America, justice can be influenced by who has the resources to fight the longest. But what about the average person? Could someone without Hulk Hogan's fame, or Thiel's money, win a similar case? That question remains hotly debated. While the Hogan case expanded the possibilities for privacy lawsuits, it didn't erase the legal hurdles that ordinary people face when taking on the media. Yet the symbolic power of the verdict is undeniable. It sent a message that even the most powerful publishers aren't untouchable, and that sometimes, the court of law can override the court of public opinion. For the media industry, the Gawker shutdown was a moment of reckoning. Gawker had built its brand on fearlessness, some would say shamelessness. It prided itself on going where traditional outlets wouldn't, often at the expense of tact or ethics. But Hogan's lawsuit exposed the vulnerability of that model. No longer was it enough to attract clicks and generate buzz. Now, publishers had to consider the legal, financial, and cultural costs of pushing boundaries. In the years that followed, the media landscape fractured further. Some outlets doubled down on salacious content, shifting to platforms with fewer legal constraints. Others embraced a more cautious, curated approach, emphasizing fact-checking, legal vetting, and a clearer moral compass. The rise of subscription-based journalism, driven by reader trust and loyalty, began to edge out the ad-driven clickbait era that Gawker had once thrived in. And then there's Hogan himself. Though he won the case, the trial came at a steep personal price. The private life he fought so hard to protect had been laid bare for the world to see. Testimonies about his private life, awkward footage from the tape, and endless media commentary followed him long after the court handed down its decision. For many, Hogan ceased to be just the wrestling icon in red and yellow. He became the face of a messy, deeply human legal battle. Still, Hogan stood by his decision. In interviews after the trial, he repeatedly said that it was never about the money. It was about drawing a line. About sending a message to the media, and to the world, that everyone deserves basic dignity, no matter how famous they are. The legacy of Hogan vs. Gawker continues to echo through modern pop culture. It's been referenced in law school classrooms, journalism seminars, and countless podcasts dissecting everything from celebrity privacy to billionaire influence. Even Hollywood took notice. The story behind the trial is reportedly being adapted into a film, with interest from A-list producers and actors alike. It's no wonder. The trial had all the makings of a blockbuster: private life, power, betrayal, and a dramatic courtroom showdown. But beyond the headlines, what really lingers is the ethical dilemma the case posed to society. Are we, as a culture, addicted to watching famous people fall? And when we consume their most private moments, leaked texts, revenge porn, leaked tapes, what does that say about us? Hogan's case didn't just hold Gawker accountable. It held up a mirror to the rest of us. It asked whether our obsession with fame has gone too far. Whether we've confused public curiosity with moral entitlement. Whether we truly value privacy, or just pretend to, until someone else's scandal shows up in our feed. And that, perhaps, is the most enduring lesson of all, because while Hogan may have walked away with a courtroom win, the broader fight, for privacy, for responsible media, for human decency, is far from over. In fact, it's more relevant now than ever. Today, everyone has a digital footprint. We all leave behind trails of data, moments captured by security cameras, screenshots, tweets, text messages, any of which can be weaponized by bad actors or careless platforms. What happened to Hogan isn't limited to the rich and famous. In the age of viral content and online outrage, anyone can become a headline overnight. That's why Hogan vs. Gawker continues to resonate. It's not just a cautionary tale for journalists or a victory lap for celebrities. It's a story about the cost of exposure, the limits of power, and the fight for boundaries in a world that wants to erase them. And perhaps that's the most ironic twist of all. For decades, Hulk Hogan was a character, a brand, a performance. But it wasn't until he took off the bandana, stepped off the stage, and entered a courtroom as Terry Bollea that he delivered the most powerful move of his career. Not a leg drop, not a title win, but a message. That no matter how famous you are, you're still entitled to be human, and that even in the loudest moments of spectacle, silence, privacy, and dignity still matter. If this trial taught us anything, it's that truth is not always the highest moral good. That broadcasting pain, even if it's real, can still be wrong. That just because something happened, doesn't mean the world has a right to see it. And maybe, just maybe, the real heroes aren't the ones who share everything, but the ones who fight for what they won't. Years after the final gavel slammed in that Florida courtroom, the ripples of Hogan vs. Gawker are still being felt. But here's what they don't tell you: this wasn't just the end of a gossip website, it was the beginning of a reckoning. In the years that followed, the media industry underwent a radical transformation. Gawker's fall became a cautionary tale whispered in every newsroom. The old mantra, "publish and apologize later," was dying. Editors began second-guessing whether viral value was worth the legal risk. Fact-checking, once considered optional in the click-driven economy, became mandatory. The effect? A slow, sometimes painful evolution. Tabloid giants like TMZ began treading more carefully. Sites that built their empires on humiliation, the kinds of places that used to post leaked nudes, slurred celebrity rants, and private text messages for sport, either cleaned up or fell behind. The fear of being gawkered crept in. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley was taking notes. Peter Thiel's shadowy backing of Hogan's lawsuit introduced a new concept to the tech elite: media disruption by proxy. It wasn't just about building platforms anymore, it was about controlling narratives. Tech billionaires realized they didn't need to buy newspapers to shape public discourse. All they needed was one person willing to fight a case, and the money to fund it from behind the scenes, and this set a dangerous precedent. While Hogan's case appeared, on the surface, to be about justice and dignity, it opened a loophole. Billionaires could now bankroll lawsuits that aligned with their vendettas, all without ever stepping foot in the courtroom or facing public scrutiny. The line between righteous litigation and strategic censorship began to blur. Suddenly, the press wasn't just worried about getting sued by a celebrity, it was worried about the invisible hand behind them. That chilling effect, subtle as it was, began reshaping what stories were told, and more importantly, which ones weren't. But the story doesn't end there. The very platforms that once mocked Hogan's lawsuit, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, have since found themselves grappling with the exact same dilemma. Where is the line between free expression and personal violation? Take YouTube, for example. In the wake of Hogan's case, the company faced mounting pressure to crack down on revenge porn and non-consensual content. It wasn't just about copyright anymore, it was about human rights. In response, platforms introduced stricter reporting tools, faster takedown procedures, and new algorithms to detect harmful uploads. Instagram followed suit. TikTok, still in its infancy at the time of Hogan's trial, now faces global scrutiny over how it handles user privacy. The online world had entered a new era, one where the right to publish had to constantly battle the right not to be exposed. Even law enforcement got involved. The rise of deepfakes, AI-generated videos that can realistically superimpose someone's face onto compromising material, forced legislators to revisit privacy laws written long before the internet even existed. In some states, new bills were introduced that explicitly outlawed synthetic pornographic material. And guess what many of those bills cited as a turning point? Hogan v. Gawker, because while Hogan's trial involved a real tape, the principles behind the case, the questions of consent, newsworthiness, and personal violation, applied just as much to synthetic content as they did to stolen footage. And let's talk about that word, consent. Hogan's case made it impossible to ignore. Until then, the media treated celebrity privacy as a punchline. Paparazzi were applauded. Leaks were celebrated. But in court, Hogan's team argued a radical truth: just because someone is famous doesn't mean they've signed away their right to consent. That argument stuck. It influenced civil cases around revenge porn. It showed up in class action lawsuits against companies that mishandled user data. It laid the groundwork for the right to be forgotten movements, legal efforts that now let people request removal of outdated or irrelevant information about them from search engines. And culturally, it forced fans and media consumers to look inward. Audiences began questioning their own complicity. The same people who once laughed at scandalous leaks started asking, would I want my worst moment online forever? Would I want the world to dissect my private life, frame by frame, for entertainment? The Hogan trial created space for empathy where mockery once reigned, but not everyone welcomed that shift. Critics still argue that Hogan's case, while justified, was a Trojan horse. A convenient vehicle for powerful men to punch down at the free press under the guise of morality. Some point out that, if it had been an average citizen instead of Hulk Hogan, the media might have gotten away with it. That the justice system still favors those with money, connections, and fame, and they're not wrong, because for all its influence, Hogan vs. Gawker didn't fix everything. It didn't stop paparazzi from stalking celebrities. It didn't stop websites from profiting off humiliation. It didn't stop our endless hunger for scandal, but it did crack the foundation. It reminded the media, and the world, that there are limits. That not every moment deserves an audience. That being public doesn't mean being unprotected, and in a world where privacy is treated like an antique, that's a powerful reminder. Today, Hogan rarely speaks about the trial. He's gone back to being Hulk again, signing autographs, making convention appearances, promoting WWE retrospectives. The courtroom Hulk, the man in the black suit speaking softly into a mic while the world judged him, has faded back into Terry Bollia's shadow, but his legacy lives on in unexpected places. In journalism classes, where students debate the ethics of viral content. In tech policy panels, where leaders discuss how to handle deepfake legislation. In every editorial meeting where someone asks, do we really need to publish this? That's the paradox of Hogan vs. Gawker. It wasn't about wrestling. It wasn't about a tape. It wasn't even about Gawker, it was about boundaries, and whether, in a world addicted to exposure, we still believe in protecting them. Because in the end, the most powerful thing Hulk Hogan ever did wasn't win a title, it was telling the world, this far, and no further. In the wake of the courtroom storm, you might expect Hulk Hogan's public image to be scorched earth, scorched by scandal, courtroom drama.